Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Do you want to hear about my reoccurring dreams I have?
Okay.
Okay. So I keep having these reoccurring dreams where I have these thick manes of hair.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the glory days.
And I'll be like, I have so much hair. What happened?
Like in the dream, you'll wake
Yeah,
up.
in the dream, I'm like, I have so much hair, and I'm like running my hands through it.
And you remember being bald, and so you're like, this is a miracle.
No. I don't even think about the fact that I'm bald. I'm just like connected to my hair. Like there's so much of it. This is amazing.
Oh.
And then occasionally I do in the dream wake up to the idea of like, I thought I was bald. I got my hair back. And
Your soul's like something's missing. It's trying to work that out subconsciously while you sleep.
yeah, I felt like it was trying to have a conversation with me. So recently I felt pretty inspired. I saw this post by Hulk Hogan.
Uh-huh.
And I was just looking at these lovely locks around the back of his head. And I was like, what if I grow a Hulk Hogan? I was like, I still got lovely locks all over here.
These lovely lady
to
locks.
be had. I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I could run my hands to the back of my hair.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't think you'd let me have a Hulk Hogan, would you?
Let is a weird word. Like that makes it sound like I'm in control of your decisions.
I don't think you're like in control of my decisions, but I feel like you could divorce me over it. No, keep that and I'm out, you know.
I mean, I don't feel like divorce would be
Can you
where
imagine me shaking my Hulk Hogan just, over my shoulder?
I don't think I would divorce you. I think I might have a hard time, like, I may not find you as attractive.
Oh,
But that's realistic. If I did some things to my hair, you
I
may
don't
not
know.
find me as attractive.
you don't find Hulk Hogan attractive?
I don't know. I haven't seen his luscious locks that you're talking about recently.
Maybe I needed the mustache though.
I can't picture him, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, today we're talking about empathy, and Abby has no ability to empathize with Hulk Hogan. She just can't see him.
I can't imagine him. I don't
Yeah, it's a problem. You can't imagine him. You can't imagine his circumstance, his hair, whatever. This story has nothing to do with today, but it is
No.
empathy.
Yeah, today we were talking about something that I think is the most important relationship skill to have is empathy.
Yeah.
In friendships, in marriages, in dating, in politics, in the world, in countries, like a healthy culture has healthy empathy.
Yeah.
And I know in our marriage, there's a lot of ways that when we started, we didn't have empathy for each other, and it caused us a lot of pain and a lot of heartache. And learning empathy is really what transformed our relationship, where there could be love and connection as bridges across our differences instead of walls and judgments when we looked at each other. And I think the concept of empathy is interesting because there is toxic empathy.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about this really quick before you got on to that. There's 3 levels to this conversation. There is not having empathy, there's having empathy, and then there's having toxic empathy. And it's like you swing on the pendulum from one side to the other, right? I'm having none or I'm having toxic. And we want to kind of highlight what it looks like to live out of no empathy, having empathy, and having toxic empathy.
Yeah, so you can find a healthy balance. I think everyone is living their best life if they're in that healthy middle place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what our marriage looked like when we got together?
Yeah. So when we look back at the early stages of our marriage, I can talk about me.
Yeah.
How about I'll talk about me?
And I'll talk about me.
And you can handle you. Before I ever got into marriage, I actually had a weird thing where there was a semblance of empathy, but for the most part, a lot of times I would look at people, I'm like, what the hell is their problem? I don't understand why they do that. Are they just stupid? Like, so I had this sense of like, I understand me. I don't understand the rest of the world. And if the rest of the world doesn't operate the way that I do, they're either idiots or ignorant or uninformed or weak or powerless.
Absolutely.
So where I didn't have empathy, I had an overwhelming sense of judgment.
Yeah. And narrow-mindedness.
Correct.
My way is the right way, or this way is the best way.
Yeah. So places that don't have empathy are a breeding ground for harsh judgments, right? And in those harsh judgments, it becomes an us versus them.
Yeah.
So my lack of empathy said there's me and I'm good, and people who are like me are good, and people who are not like me, they're all bad, stupid, terrible,
weak,
worthless. Yeah, like that's what that fosters.
No, I can't even fathom you thinking like that.
You act like I'm a monster.
Well, I'm just feeling validated for the whole beginning of our marriage, because every adjective you just gave to those outside people is how you treated me.
Yeah.
When I didn't think like you.
Yeah. There was,
and I often did not think like you.
And here's the deal. So when I came into marriage, I may not have expressed that fully. I may not have said the words, but the energy was inside of me. So on my best days, right, at some of my best times, I was just
secretly thinking I was stupid.
Totally. Yeah, I was holding in the judgments, and then and then having some sort of like bubbling anger and resentment towards you because you couldn't get on board with what was reasonable, right? Like what I thought was reasonable.
100%.
I also, when we got into marriage, you dealt with a lot of health problems, and I had a compassion, like I wanted it to stop for you. So it was a weird mix of like, I cared about you, and I would do things to take care of you inside of that, like express that. At the same time, I had this growing like resentment and emotion of like, what is your problem?
Why can't you get over this?
Why can't you get over this? Why can't you just be fine? I hear that you're sick, but you can push through it. Instead, you're just deciding to collapse and not do anything because you feel sick, quotation marks. And so my history told me that there wasn't room for sickness.
Yeah.
There was like, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps is the old saying. And you decide like, I'm going to push through this and I'm going to be okay. So I abandoned my own body often when it came to like how it felt. So I was like, it doesn't matter. Push through this body. Don't be dumb. And I will suffer through something versus enter into a space of care. So what that led to is I couldn't empathize with someone who didn't push through. I was just like, why won't you push through? And there was a sense of like, there's a deep weakness here, and this weakness needs to be rooted out.
And there's two different things going on here. One is I had chronic sickness, which is very different than being sick for a week. But if you've never had chronic sickness, you don't know how it impacts you differently to constantly be struggling with something.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, this was generational for you. You were taught to judge people who didn't push through because of how you were treated and how the people before you were treated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't judgment has no relationship with empathy. So a judgmental heart will sit and cast judgments and doesn't actually consider the full story and the full experience that someone else has had. So judgment says my experience is valid, but yours isn't.
Yes.
I have the only valid experience in this. And so you'll see a lot of people that sit inside of judgment and they have a harsh lens towards the world. And it's not an inviting, connective experience with someone who's that lacks empathy, because people who can't empathize can't actually connect well. They often only connect to that which is already their normal.
Well, it becomes us versus them.
Correct.
And so they can connect with the us people, the people who see the world exactly the same
and have
as
the
them,
same lived experience.
But they
already
can't connect with people who have different views or different world experiences or different belief systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, when I came into marriage, empathy was not high on my list of things.
Yeah. And I don't think that it was, there's a lot of things that I wish we would have been taught about marriage. And I don't think it was known like empathy is one of the most important ingredients in a healthy marriage. in a healthy relationship. And because of that lack of it, what it did is it created a bunch of walls and a bunch of places that I felt alone and judged and defensive and misunderstood, and a lot of places where I felt belittled. Like I felt really small, because judgment in itself is that hierarchy that like your way is right and my way is wrong. And so it made me feel like you thought I was less than you. And then whenever you feel like somebody is treating you like you're less than them, you feel misunderstood and defensive. And oftentimes empathy breaks the fight cycle. So a lot of times when you're fighting, it's like, I want you to hear, like maybe for sickness, like, no, I'm trying to tell you, this isn't just something that I'm being weak about. And you're like, you could just push through that. I mean, that's not what you probably said that way, but that cycle continues where I just get more loud about my pain and you get more loud about not believing it. And the only way to break that cycle is to begin to see from someone else's view.
Then there was a lot of my lack of empathy that was veiled.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't so direct.
Totally. Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was having these harsh, direct conversations. It was just me steaming and walking away and having a sense of irritation and frustration and just like holding it back, which at least kudos to me for compartmentalizing that and being like, shut up and don't say that thing that you think. Like,
you probably edited a lot.
Yeah, I did. I edited a lot, which was great for a 25-year-old to figure out how to edit starting off marriage. But I was going to say, I don't think that I was the only one that lacked a sense of empathy inside of the relationship. There might have been someone else that did in the ways too.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to actually share how you got empathy for that scenario, or if we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I mean, I could discuss it now. So I think that it's very easy to find empathy really quickly when you have to go to worst case scenarios. So it's like this. It's easy to judge someone that's homeless until you become homeless.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's easy
to judge someone who shuts down in chronic sickness until you have chronic sickness.
Yeah, it's easy to judge someone who has been fired from their job until you've been fired from your job and gone through it. And so
it's easy to judge people who are struggling with money until you've struggled with money.
Yeah. So I went into a season where I started struggling with health really bad. And all of a sudden, I felt very incapable of functioning in many different ways. Mm-hmm. And there was this fear that rose up inside of me and regret that started hitting me. Like, oh God, what have I done? I've judged someone else. I've judged Abby. I've judged other people in these areas. I haven't seen what they've been through. And now I'm having to live it. And oh shit, if I don't get my act together in all the other areas, what happens if I have to experience all the worst judgments I've ever cast on people?
What if I have to experience everything I've judged people for? That would be scary.
Dude, I remember having this terror because I'm like,
I've been so judgmental.
Especially when I went through my panic attack season and I collapsed in on myself and the panic attacks were so horrible. And I was like, holy shit, this is the worst situation ever. I've looked at people and seen them as weak and stuff like that. And like, I wouldn't wish... Like the way I had panic attacks was so horrific. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, right?
100%.
And I'm like, that was on the back end of being so sick. I went from sickness to panic attacks over it. And I found myself walking out a place where I didn't have enough strength, quotation marks, to overcome or compartmentalize and push through to the other side. So what it did to me was, again, it put a terror inside of me of like, if I don't actually come into considering the reality of other people's conditions, there's a potential that I'm bound to walk every one of them out.
Well, that's a great way to get to start to care about empathy.
And empathy,
would I want to live in their shoes?
Right. And I remember I had a lot of judgments about people in difficult financial situations before we got married. because, you know, I always
You
found
were so disciplined with your
I was
finances.
so disciplined with it.
Yeah.
It didn't mean I was wealthy, but I took care of myself because I was like very proactive about my finances. And you and I, like when we got together, we ended up getting to a place where we had no money.
Yeah.
And we found ourselves at a health clinic to take care of you. And I was not only felt like I could get emotional right now, even as I'm talking about it. I felt the weight of us being in that free healthcare clinic. I could feel the weight of us being like, if we don't get a solution here, our whole lives can be devastated and we barely have enough to be here. Right. And then I felt the weight of all the people who were in that clinic, and I could see the ache in their lives. And it quickly caused me to be like, I will not judge people who they're in tough financial times. I will not sit and judge them as they just don't work hard enough or they don't care. I'm like, I don't know what circumstance they're inside of. And I remember that was a beginning thing even inside of me of like, how do I actually get into other people's shoes? Because I don't ever want to be here again. Like, and even now today, I have zero judgment that I'm aware of people when they have difficult financial situations. I'm just like, all I know is that there's probably a lot of situations that have compounded for you to be in that circumstance.
Totally.
And I want to know that you're getting the help that you need.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and one of the things you're talking about is so important about empathy, which is empathy takes context in.
Yeah.
And so you're saying in order for you to give up judgment, it's the idea of I need to understand that there's multiple parts to your story, whether I can see them or not, that contribute to the behavior that you're doing in front of me.
Yeah.
So when I was sick and I would collapse in or feel really depressed or have lots of anxiety or I'd go into hopeless spirals a lot. If you're just looking at me going on a hopeless spiral, you're like, man, she has no emotional resilience.
Right.
But if you find out, oh, her body has been having this crazy health issue for 15 years and there's been no relief for her, and it hasn't been any answer that she's found that could even lead towards relief. And it is something that disrupts her hormones, so it causes emotional distress. Like when you start to add all of the pieces to the context of the story, and her mom was sick her whole life, and so she watched it, and so she actually has hopelessness that she's not going to get out because her mom never got out. Like when you start putting all the pieces, why I felt hopeless makes a lot of sense. And that's a lot of what empathy is if I was in your shoes and I had lived your story, learning the lessons you've learned, having the pains that you've had, going through the challenges you've gone through, I could end up in the exact same space.
Yep.
That's a lot of what empathy is.
Yep. And it's it's very easy for us to disregard the story that someone has because we lack our ability to examine our own story.
Yeah.
So most of us live lives where we condition ourselves to follow just a programming of rules and regulations and stipulations and social contracts. And we just like, I just have to do this. This is just the rules of life. And this is just how it is. And we're not considering what's my story? How does that story affect the way that I'm showing up inside of this situation? And oftentimes a story in our own lives, it's really scary to engage this story because we have to rip off oftentimes denial band-aids because we have to look beyond, how would I put it? Like the narrative that we have in our logic and go, what's actually my history? What's actually the experiences I've had? So first off, we won't engage our own personal story because of the pain that's inside of it and the difficulties that are inside of it.
Like understanding our own context.
Why do I do what I do?
What belief systems got me here? What was it that triggered my scenarios?
Because I'm basically a lot of people live on autopilot, just reacting in life and not saying like, why am I reacting? What is this reaction? Where does this come from? What's the history behind this? And how do I get connected to it?
Yeah.
So if I don't have that with my own story, it's very hard for me to want to engage someone else's story and imagine, I wonder how they got there.
Yeah.
What are the possible circumstances that could lead to this?
Yeah.
And that's where, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead and finish your thought. And then I was going to share.
I was just going to say that's where it's very easy for us as humans to condemn others, to step out into a heart of condemnation, because we can't imagine scenarios outside of our own.
Yeah. And it's actually a habit that you can learn. You can learn how to listen to people's stories. You can learn how to get curious, and you can learn how to find out about other people's worldviews and what got them there.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing, is that empathy is something that can always be, for the most part, can always be learned.
I want to add this about empathy before we go further.
Guess what we just did?
What did we just do, Abby?
We created the connection cure. And I think this is the thing that I'm most excited that we've ever created for people, because it is all of the years of courses that we've made, making it available in one monthly healing membership where you get to be connected to people who are going on the same journey as you, while getting access to all of the things that we have made: Relationship Glue, Reclaiming You, the Compassion Project,
the Father Series, Living Fully Alive, the Regulation Library.
Yes, we have so many things that we've created over the years. We've had over 10,000 people do our courses. We've met with over 4,000 individual clients. And now we have brought all of it together so that you could have access to all of it for less than one counseling session a month.
Yep. And what's really cool is that monthly we have live connection calls where people get together and have those connection moments, talk about what they're going through, how they're healing in their process. And that's been one of the number one things that people have said is so incredible about doing our courses, is the community that they create and the healing that takes place inside of that community. I mean, we've had people find their spouses,
find their best friends, find their community, because finally there's people where they realize, I'm not alone, and I'm allowed to be loved right now in the messiness of my life, before everything is fixed, before everything is perfect. You can belong before you have transformed. You can be loved before you're fixed in this community. And it is really rich and beautiful and healing. We're meant to heal with each other. And the whole point of why we made this is so that people could have a holistic healing pathway. We do so much with connecting to your body and actually learning how to move with your body through emotions so that things don't get buried alive in your body. The body keeps the score. We want to zero that score out. And then we have heart connection stuff where you're actually feeling empathy for yourself and others, where you're actually connecting to your own story, and you're actually having time to not just learn logically about why you do what you do, but actually have new feelings towards yourself. And then we have all of the logic, the neuroscience, all of the reasons why your body and your brain do what they do, so you can actually understand yourself for the first time and start to have kindness towards why your body is made to react the way it is, so that you can heal. It's body, heart, and mind all together in a way that is really, really beautiful.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a really cool membership because you get to stay as long as you want or as short as you want inside of it. You're not trapped inside of it, but you have access to an incredible community and great information. And so that is coming soon. You can go to Justin and Abby, that's abi.com, and you can get on our mailing list there, and we'll let you be the first to know when we release that. But this is something we've been planning for a while now, and I'm glad we're getting to do it.
It's about to come out.
There's two types of empathy that they talk about. There's cognitive empathy and there's affective empathy. Just so people kind of understand, cognitive is like this logical empathy.
Oh yeah.
I can build in my head, okay, here's probably the story. Excuse me. Here's how this person got to this situation.
Yeah.
So I can build a sense of more understanding from this
my
logic base.
Can totally understand what's going on. I have a friend who's like that.
Yeah.
I think this is like the dream of all dreams, because she's empathetic, but she doesn't feel emotions about it. She just is logically like, well, if they said that, then you would probably feel sad. And it's just like a logical conclusion to her.
Yeah. But the component of affective empathy is where I can engage at some level in an emotional capacity with you, and I can validate an experience that you're having and be with you in it by somehow engaging an aspect of the emotional experience that you're having.
Yeah.
And the cognitive is a great first step. But oftentimes if we're only living in a cognitive level of empathy, we're not engaging in a way that has people feel felt.
Yes. Like a felt sense of, I really actually feel like you understand me. So now when I'm not feeling good, I will feel your compassion.
Right.
It's not just words. Like you'll say, oh, I'm so sorry. I know how hard it is to not feel good.
You experience the heartfeltness.
I can feel your tenderness. I can feel your connection to what's happening. I can feel that you care.
And for me, I don't spill over into toxic empathy, which we'll get to later, right? Yeah. But I don't spill over into my self spiraling,
being overwhelmed
by the expression of your pain.
Yeah.
Right. So affective empathy is, to me, like that next step in, I can take it from here and I can take it into this and I can move into this relational connection. So I just wanted people to kind of understand, like, okay, empathy can come from here and then it can come down into here, into this space. And you were saying you can build that, you can cultivate that experience.
Yeah. I think for me, the interesting thing about talking about judgments is, so we came from very kind of different backgrounds. And so I had a lot of judgments for the way that your life was put together. And you had a lot of judgments for the way that my life was not put together. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up, like in a hoarder's home, and you grew up in an OCD clean home, like the home you grew up in was beyond a normal clean kind of house.
Yeah.
And the home I grew up on was beyond a dirty kind of house.
Yeah, is that hoarder experience.
Yeah, so we had a very different experience. And I remember judging you so much for, like, you could not emotionally be regulated or okay when the house was a mess. It felt like too chaotic and too overwhelming for you. And I was like, that's just crazy, because I know how to just dissociate from the mess around me. I know how to like tune it out and be fine. So why can't you tune it out and be fine? And it's that idea, again, non-empathy is that my way is better than yours. And it's a natural impulse. Like, I didn't consciously think through, do I think that being a hoarder is better than being clean? But I did subconsciously have a reaction to, like, you're having a lot of anxiety, you're having a lot of frustration, you're like not an okay person in a mess. That doesn't feel like a healthy way to live. So my way must be better of dissociating from my environment. Now, when I look through our journey, I can actually see that the more I allowed myself to be in a clean environment, the more it actually did positively impact me, the more I realized that there was actually a gift in it. And then once I got like used to living in a cleaner environment, I noticed that it did affect me when things were messy. And so I got to the place where I could understand why that felt crazy to you. But because I had so many self-protectors around my lived experience, I couldn't get out of my own self-protection to see that you had valid needs, valid concerns, valid emotions. And a lot of times when we don't have empathy, it's because we're judging somebody else so that we can stay the same. So like I can keep my core values the same. So my core values of not needing to care about what the environment I'm in is like matters more than understanding you and your needs. And it's a way to push away when people are unhappy, especially for people like me I'm overly empathetic. I have a lot of toxic empathy. So one of the ways that I can push away feeling empathy for other people is if I judge them. So if I am like, I don't have to feel sad that you feel sad. If I'm like, well, the reason you're feeling sad is stupid.
Yeah, right.
Like if I judge your reason for having negative emotions as bad, then I'm allowed to push your negative emotions away because I didn't have healthy boundaries with empathy. So I can often feel, and I actually have worked with a brain doctor who did a brain scan on me, and they said, you actually have this huge part of your brain that's way overactive empathy. They're like, the amount of empathy you have is probably breaking you. It probably makes you chronically depressed and anxious. And I was like, I know, it's horrible.
You felt known, didn't you?
I felt very, very known. But so one of the ways that I had to disconnect from empathy was through judgment. If I decide that your emotions aren't valid, then I'm allowed to just push your emotions away from me instead of feeling them. And that felt really good to me. And I think, there's a lot of ways that you were a get shit doner. Mm-hmm. And instead of seeing the value, like there's a lot of values in that. There's a lot of ways that the more you can have peace. If you get a bunch done and then you can just enjoy and relax. Well, I had so many issues, I'm on the autism spectrum and I have ADHD. And so there's a lot of issues for me in getting shit done sometimes. And so I would judge your desire to get that done. And I'd be like, why aren't you like me, who just kind of floats throughout my life and maybe gets something done and maybe doesn't, but doesn't have any shame or self-hatred about it. Even though I had shame and self-hatred about it. So there was a lot of ways that I judged your desire to get stuff done, your desire to be productive, your desire to push through things. And it was because we were coming from the opposite ends of the spectrum. And one of the reasons I think judgment can get so easy is when we see another person doing something in dysfunction, we easily throw the baby out with the bathwater. So for me, it could be like, oh, well, you're too consumed with wanting to get stuff done. That feels unhealthy. So I'll just throw out even the desire to get stuff done. You're too consumed with needing the house to be clean, and that doesn't feel healthy. So I'll just throw out the entire baby of the house being clean matters. And so now that I've grown in my skill sets and my habits and my maturity and coming out of PTSD more, I've been able to be like, yeah, it actually does feel good when you can get stuff done. But not at the way that you did it when we got married, because that was like kind of like a slave driver. Mm-hmm. And so we've kind of come to empathy for each other, where you can see why sometimes things are hard for me to do. And I can see why your habits and how you think about doing them actually makes life easier. And so we've been able to come to the middle a lot. But what happened is, because I judged you and your ways, I didn't see the value of you and your ways. And so you've actually been a huge advocate for me to learn some skills that I really needed to be able to thrive as a human. But because in the beginning, I just judged all those skills, I wasn't able to grow from them or have them help strengthen my life.
Yeah. I watch where people will have a lot of unhealthy interactions with other people. And then, like you said, we become reactive and we go, I'm going to throw everything out. Mm-hmm. I think about this even in the emotional health field. And with emotions, I'll see a lot of people, they'll have a negative experience with someone that has, say, a lot of pain or fear or just like big emotions. And they'll be like, I don't understand them. They'll lack the empathy for why that person has those. They'll feel hurt by the emotional condition. And then they will have a hard stance against those emotions. Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, I don't ever feel that emotion. I refuse to ever feel anger, because anger just hurts people, because mm-hmm. they can't empathize like with the person that had way too much anger that hurt them in ways mm-hmm. that was really destructive. So then they cut themselves off from an aspect of the human experience.
Yeah.
And so again, like you're saying, like there's a part of you that felt pain from the way that I was interacting. You cut yourself off from a valuable part of the human experience because it was done in an extreme mm-hmm. and in a painful response, right?
Yeah. Your extreme cleanliness, your extreme task, get things done, your extreme drivenness felt dangerous to me. So I threw all of it out. And now that it doesn't feel dangerous to me, and part of the reason it doesn't feel dangerous is you've come a little bit more to the middle. You've had empathy and I've had empathy. So now I see it as an asset to my life.
Right. And that was happening on both sides. Mm-hmm. So when I couldn't empathize with you, all I saw was the destructive things that were happening in a life that was going nowhere. Mm-hmm. She has no value for getting anything done. She's never going to go anywhere, But what I did is I started asking myself, first off, tried to understand some of the reasons that you were defeated, because you had real defeat.
Real reasons to have defeat.
Right. Then you also had these expressions of everything's going to be okay. And I started going, there could be a lot more peace in my life if I actually believe things were going to be okay. And I could still try to get things done. And I started to move, like you said, towards that balance. We both worked towards balance, and we balanced each other out to a place where it's like, oh, we can thrive and do things, and we can have peace while we do it and know that everything's going to work out okay.
Yeah.
So it's been beautiful, but we wouldn't be able to have found the balance without the empathy.
And it's really hard. One of the ways you can start to notice where you have a lack of empathy is where you haven't become conscious of having an experience before, you know? And so, like, I was thinking about this today. I really struggled to have empathy for victim mentality for a lot of my life. Like, people who were in situations where a leader had abused them. I had less empathy because I grew up feeling like I was as powerful as my parents. I never thought they were more like that they were in charge. I thought I was in charge. And so I had a real, like, I'm going to say no if I don't like something, I'm going to say no. And because of that, it took me years to recognize, oh, not everybody grew up like me. Not everybody felt that they were equal to the leaders. And so not everybody has a no that they can say no with. So it's that concept of, now I notice if there's something I haven't experienced, that's typically where my greatest judgment lives. And if I can start to ask people in that specific field, so that'd be a great one. Like, I have several people that told me stories of feeling really, like the power dynamic between them and their boss really affected them. And so it was like me being like, okay, I want to understand, what did it feel like for you? What did it look like? What were the thoughts that you had? And they'd say things like, oh, I didn't feel like I could say no. I didn't feel like I could have a voice. I didn't feel like I was allowed to say what I needed. And to me, that's like so crazy.
Right.
And that's when I was like, oh, I don't have empathy and so it began the process. Questions and understanding is often what starts to lead me down towards empathy for people.
It's interesting because I think that one of the things that we believe when we don't have empathy is, if I do have empathy for people, then it means that I will have to agree with their powerlessness, their victimhood, their destructive thinking, whatever it is that potentially they have.
Yeah.
Like the negative aspects of someone's life, I will have to embrace it if I become empathetic towards it. Or if I become empathetic towards it, it will give them permission
to keep doing a behavior that feels unsafe.
Yeah, especially in relationship with us. And for me, that's part of why I had trouble empathizing with you, because it was like, if I empathize with her, then I'm just going to have to embrace the entirety of her destructive thought process that I found, that I perceived as destructive, which some of it was very destructive.
And some of it was.
Like mine was, yeah.
Yeah. But as you've learned empathy, what actually feels true?
Yeah. So as I've learned empathy, I've also learned boundaries. And I have a deeper sense of self. So I'm like, oh, I can totally engage empathy towards your world. And while engaging empathy and having care for your condition and even better understanding you, I can also toe a line and say, and here's expectations of what this relationship's going to be and what I have capacity to do. I can have my own autonomy inside of that. I can set up internal boundaries. Like, I grew up in a childhood where it wasn't okay to set up internal or external boundaries.
Yes.
So a boundaryless person has a really hard time being able to empathize properly. Like it's scary to empathize if you don't have boundaries, because then you can get consumed, which is toxic empathy, right? And so I had this relationship with toxic empathy where I'm like, but if I move over there, then I will get overcome by this person, their emotions, the feelings that I could feel from them.
Yeah. So it's either like, I have judgment towards you and I don't feel empathy for you, or I have to fully give up all of my beliefs to have empathy for you and lose my whole sense of self.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to allow your behaviors then to freely do whatever you want,
Yes.
especially within this relationship.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. Brene Brown did a study on who has the most empathy, and it was actually the people who had the highest boundaries.
Yes.
You cannot have a lot of healthy empathy without having a lot of internal boundaries. And those two things almost seem like the opposite of each other. But I know for me, I had really toxic empathy in our marriage. And one of the ways that played out would be when in the beginning of our marriage, you had PTSD and you'd go into a rage. And then after the rage, you would share about what triggered, like you were, most of the time it was because you were in a flashback and you were in a flashback from an abusive situation in your childhood. And so your reactions now were coming from this hurt little kid that was being activated inside of our relationship. I had so much empathy that when I would hear that, I would be, I'd feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'd cry because I was so sad for how you'd been hurt and how you'd been affected and how much pain you'd been in. And that's not actually the toxic part. Like, that's actually beautiful. It really helped me to understand you. And I think it was healing for you to have somebody have compassion for the areas that were really hurt. The toxic part was that then I stopped having my own feelings about what had just happened, and I didn't have any boundaries around it. So a healthy amount of empathy would have been like, oh my gosh, I totally understand why you did that. And we need to have some boundaries so that never happens again. And I need to let you know what I experienced. So toxic empathy for me is when I give up knowing how I'm doing, knowing what's going on inside of me, and having healthy standards in order to empathize with you. Because I see your heart, or I see how much trauma you've been in, or I see how hard life has been for somebody. If we decide that means I'm not allowed to have boundaries or standards, that's when it now becomes toxic empathy. There has to be a place where I'm allowed to both feel compassion for you and tenderness towards you, and can hold on to what's going on inside of me at the same time.
Well, a word that you're looking for in that is impact.
Mm-hmm.
So part of toxic empathy says that I have to let go of the reality of the impact that I'm experiencing from someone else's behavior.
Because what they felt was bigger or worse or more sad.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, I am scared of hurting you further by allowing you to have a mirror held up to you to see the impact that you've made, right? And so a lot of times that's part of the boundarylessness is that we say, oh, because I can see how you got there, it also means I am not going to hold you accountable because I believe the lie that you are fragile and that this will break you, or I don't want you to have to feel bad emotions.
Yes.
So it's discarding the idea that I have had bad emotions and experiences, and saying that doesn't matter as much as the fact that they are going to have bad emotions.
Yeah. And I felt that way. I didn't want you to feel bad emotions about what had happened. And so I didn't share how much it was impacting me in healthy ways. And I didn't set boundaries around it. And now now we've transformed our relationship, and that's not where we're at all. But it took me getting to the place of having to decide my boundaries mattered as much as my empathy mattered, and having empathy on myself.
Yeah.
Actually being like, well, how is this impacting me, and how am I feeling? And I've seen this happen in so many situations in my life where I've stepped into toxic empathy, where it's like, I so understand the pain that someone else is feeling that I actually get lost in the pain that someone else is feeling. And then I feel like I can't add anything to it. So maybe there's somebody who's doing something that's really, really hurting me, but I understand why they're hurting me. So now I'm not going to say you have to stop hurting me, because I have so much compassion for why they're hurting me. And that begins to become enabling behavior. And there's a lot of conversations right now about empathy versus toxic empathy. And I've heard pastors saying that empathy is toxic, and we want to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and just say that there's both things.
I would go as far as to say those pastors are toxic.
So the idea would be that empathy is the entire, that is what Jesus did. He came on the earth to experience what it was like to be human and to experience what pain and loss was inside of human form, to actually know what we feel from the inside out.
Well, not
That
only
is
that,
his life.
not only that, but he wanted us to be able to understand that he identified with our experience.
Yes.
Like, actually, the creator of the entire known universe fully understands every part of your human condition. It's not just, I'm not just looking from the outside judging you. I have stepped into the fullness of your humanity so that you would know that I actually get you.
Yes. So I feel like empathy intrinsically is a very spiritual value, but it's okay to say like empathy that becomes enabling actually does create a lot of problems. And I think that's why a lot of times people who have high amounts of empathy end up being with addicts, or end up being with narcissists, or end up being with very dysfunctional systems, because they keep saying, but I can see why. I can see the hurt little kid inside of them. I can see all the trauma they've been through. I can see all the reasons they do what they do. And it's beautiful to see all the reasons why somebody does what they do. That should never run over healthy boundaries, healthy accountability. There needs to be that place inside of us. I've had to learn this the hard way, because I do lean towards toxic empathy. So I've had to learn, I can fully understand why you do what you do. I can have empathy and compassion on you for it. And I can still say, you can't do that to me.
Yeah, it's the word "and," right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I see your history, I see your story. I have gentleness and kindness in my heart towards your humanity, the fact that there's a real person here. And I am holding value for myself as a person. And with that value comes a boundary, comes an expectation of how we're going to relate if we're going to stay inside of close connection. And the combination of those two make for healthy environments, the empathy and then the empowerment of boundaries, right, inside of the system. I do want to add on toxic empathy before I forget about it. I had this story where I was meeting with my SE therapist. So I'm in somatic experience therapy, and I'm talking kind of about, we're having a conversation about an entanglement of other people's opinions with who I am and stuff like that. And she gives me this giant ball of mixed yarns and stuff like that. And I extract this one giant string as I'm sitting there holding it. And I purposely do. I'm like, this is me untangling myself out of all of this. And as we untangle it, she says, may I have the other side of the string? Well, first she says, if you would, take both sides of the string and I want you to pull on it. What do you notice? And I was like, this is really hard to break and stuff like that. I'm like, and she was like, what else do you notice? And I'm like, I'm noticing pain inside of my hand, because part of the therapy is me connecting deeper into my body and understanding what my body is communicating to me, which helps us to set healthy boundaries.
Yes.
Like, my body's saying no.
Yes.
I don't need to logic through it. I'm done at this point because my body said, no, I don't like this, or yes, please, let's go forward with it. And so I'm learning that body awareness. And I noticed the pain on my hands as I'm pulling on it, trying to break it. And she was like, all right, what would it be okay if I took the other side of it? She takes the other side of it. And she was like, she says, relationships can sometimes be a tug of war, huh? And she was like, go ahead, engage it. And I start pulling, but I don't pull very hard.
Yeah.
Right. And I have this phrase go through my head, and I'm like, I need to say this out loud for Judy, because she definitely needs to hear this, because this is bonkers what I'm thinking. And I said, I'm actually scared of pulling too hard because I don't want to hurt your hand, because I know how much it hurt my hand when I was pulling on it. And she goes, oh, so you believe the lie that I don't have the choice to let go of this rope
if I don't want
to. I feel it's too painful.
Whoa.
And I was like, yes, I know that already, Judy. That's why I said it out loud. You're not proving a point to me. I'm self-aware in this moment. And so she goes ahead and she was like, so with that, let's go ahead and further this. So we start pulling it back and forth, and I make this joke. I'm like, But if I let go, it's going to hurt my ego. So I keep pulling and pulling, and I end up like pulling her out of her seat. And finally she lets go of it, right? But at this point, my hand is nearly like black and blue because I've been pulling so hard on my hand and it's painful. And I say like, oh, I stayed inside of this far too long in this relational tug of war, disregarding how it was impacting me because of what I thought the outcome should be on this scenario.
Whoa.
Right? And so I could empathize with her and her pain experience.
Like, I don't want your hand to hurt.
But I couldn't empathize with myself inside of it. But I had a level, and that's where it was this toxic empathy that took place inside of the scenario.
That is such a good, this is such a good example of toxic empathy and how we often feel more concern about the people around us than we do about what we are experiencing. And because of that, we don't set the boundaries we need to set.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was good for me to see that. Like, oh.
And it made you realize, oh, I sometimes hold on to things that are hurting me for too long because I'm more concerned about other people or the outcome I think it needs to have.
And what I did is I was reflecting out of there and I asked myself, how often have I engaged relationships to the point where it was detrimental to my well-being because I was more worried about how it might affect people if I said no more to this relationship or I set better boundaries early on. And I was looking at it being like, my life is littered with moments that I said yes to something that came at my detriment. And then in the end, ended disastrously anyways. Right. The outcome wasn't, oh, this worked out for the better. No, my heart got bitter and resentful towards myself and towards the other people because I allowed so much pain to happen because I had toxic empathy about the confrontations that needed to happen, the things that I needed to share honestly with people, and the places where I needed to say, this is where my line is inside of my life.
Yeah. You know, I love that I have so much empathy, but toxic empathy in my life is what led me into codependency. And I often think when I describe what codependency feels like for me, it's when I kind of jump out of my own body and I get into your world. So I'm imagining what it feels like to be you and what's going on for you. And I have lots of emotions. I feel sad for you or care towards you or concern for you. But I am now spending most of my life energy concerned about and looking at you, and none of my life energy concerned about and taking care of me. And what ends up happening is then I do a lot of weird behaviors because I'm not connected to my authentic self and I'm not knowing about my own experience and my own impact. And because of that, people can be hurting me and I'm not even paying attention to how they have hurt me, towards what pain is going on inside of me. And it's pulling, like, the way to distinguish for me getting out of toxic empathy is, it's almost like emotion of like, can I still be with me and care about your experience?
Yeah.
And that is the goal. Can I care about both of our experiences at the same time? So if you say something that hurts my feelings, I can care about how that effect is from your childhood or how that has been triggered. And I can also care about how what you said impacted me at the same time. And healthy empathy doesn't have a system of like one person gets to trump the other.
Yeah.
So when I'm in codependency, I'm like, your pain clearly trumps my pain, so I'm going to shove my pain away. Healthy empathy is like, I can see that you have pain. I can see that I have pain, and both of our pain matters.
Yeah. One of the toxic traits you have in toxic empathy is that you go into control.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I believe that this is a very human thing. Like a lot of people do this because we empathize so deeply.
I'm feeling your emotions so much that I need to control you to make better decisions so that you will have happier emotions so that I can feel good again. I'm not feeling my own emotions. In fact, I don't even know that there's a difference between who we are. I'm so enmeshed with your experience that the only way I feel like I can live a happy life is if I can make you make decisions so that you will be happy so that I can feel happy.
Yes. And I'm sure that was as equally exhausting for you as it was for me.
It's so good.
But I know that I did that too. Like I would go into feeling you spiraling in certain areas of life, and then I would feel the weight of it. Because I had no empathy or I had toxic empathy.
Yep. Totally.
And you talked about the enmeshment, and I learned about enmeshment. So part of me not having empathy was me trying to get out of enmeshment. I didn't know the word, and I didn't know what that was, but like having no empathy was my answer to not being all consumed, right? And so once I started diving into marriage and having to engage the empathy, I swung quickly inside of my soul to toxic empathy, and I'd feel you spinning out, and I'd be like, oh my God, let me give you answers to why this is happening so that I can get you out of this insanity because I don't want to drown with you.
100%. But that doesn't actually feel compassionate. The funny thing is I had all this empathy, but you weren't experiencing empathy from me.
No.
Because you were experiencing control.
Yes.
You were experiencing me wanting to get you out of your pain because it didn't feel safe. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something that when we get into a healthy expression of empathy, we actually let go of control, because now instead of control, we've implemented boundaries. That's not even an external expression of boundaries. That's an internal boundary that we start setting. So we start being able to say, this isn't mine to carry. I can see where they're at. I can have care for their experience, but I don't
be kind to them, but I don't have to fix it for them.
And I don't have to carry the weight of this internally. I can put a wall. I actually had to learn to create walls inside of myself, healthy walls, not walls of disconnection from you as a human or judgment, but it was walls of said, that's not mine to carry. And I had to teach myself. She can feel hopeless. I can feel hope. And I can maintain hope and walk through this. And I don't have to be cut off from her. So I'll watch people who try to attempt that, and then they become stone walls, right? And they're like, you're just being hopeless over there. But I can go, oh, you're being hopeless right now.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry that's your experience.
And I don't have to feel it.
And I feel so much hope right now in this. And I don't have to tell you about it. You're welcome to just sit in that.
But this is what healthy is learning how to get out of the black and white thinking and black and white behaving. So before it was, I can have empathy or I can have boundaries. And what you learned is how to have both. Because now I will feel your compassion. When I'm having a hard day, I will feel your compassion, be like, oh, I'm so sorry. It makes so much sense that this is scary for you. And I can feel you still holding on to, and I feel hope about life. It's not one or the other, but it's almost like it's like we have to expand our heart space, where it's like we're either used to doing all one or all the other, and we have to learn how to create room to hold both at the same time.
Yeah. I was talking to a leader recently, and have a lot of compassion for their experience, but they were talking about how they had so much confusion about somebody within their space and how this person couldn't just figure it out and do life differently. And as they were talking about that, I began to challenge them on there might be more to their story than you understand inside of this. And as I was talking to this individual, I was like, your survival response was to become very hyper independent and to be like, I won't be victimized by anything. And I said, someone else's story in a survival response to their pain in their childhood is that they end up in learned helplessness, that you're powerless to authority. You have to do whatever authority says you have to do. And it makes sense why they could get into a destructive experience like they're having inside of this. And it was very clear to me that this was an area that this person didn't have empathy.
Yeah.
Right. And so I reached back out to them and I challenged them. And I said, hey, I think that this is an area of weakness, is like that empathy needs to be something that's cultivated inside your world. And they were like, you're right. You totally understand my personality. You're good inside of this. And the reason I'm saying this is I think that a lot of people inside positions of leadership lack necessary empathy because you're trying to steer ships. And in order to steer a ship, it kind of feels like
you have to have an independent, powerful personality.
And so to implement empathy, it can feel very scary because it feels like, do I lose my ability to lead if I empathize? And so for me, part of this, as someone who has aspects of leadership, in my empathy, I also have the ability to be okay with other people not being okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we need to be able to do to foster empathy, healthy empathy and not toxic empathy, is to be able to get to a point of understanding every person has their own journey of suffering and experiences of pain that we're all going to have to participate in. So that doesn't mean that we become callous towards it. No. But what we do is I say, I know that right now when I set this boundary,
it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. And that's going to be okay because they're going to work through that pain. And I'm going to have kindness in the way that I set this, and gentleness. And I'm going to leave room for relationship inside of this scenario. And I'm going to let them have their human experience.
Yeah.
And that's so necessary to be able to do this.
Yeah. I want to say that the ways I've learned empathy the most is from the hardest things I've been through.
Yeah.
Every time that I've judged somebody and then I go through it and then I'm like, oh crap. Now I can see I think about this a lot. When I was younger, I judged leaders. I'll be specific. I judged pastors a lot when I was younger. I was like, all they need to do is this and this and this. And if they just made these decisions, it'd be so much easier. And if they did this, blah, 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 blah. And then I got into leadership and you're like, oh my gosh, every decision is infinitely complex. And there's so many ways that you make this decision because of all this information, but people only see this thing. And so then they think you're doing that. And I started realizing leadership is more complex and there's not always a right or wrong way to do it. Then I was in scenarios where we were having to go through layoffs with people when I was working in a business. And I was like, I heard employees be like, well, they should have done it this way. And I'm like, oh, we literally talked through every single way we could do layoffs, knowing that there was no answer that would be pain-free.
Yeah.
But actually caring and wanting it to be the least pain-free. And we tried things and then found out that they weren't always the best, or maybe that caused more problems or not. Or maybe it's still, even though it was painful, was better than the other options on the table. And I started seeing this thing where in the beginning, I was like, it's so simple to just be a leader. Why don't you just do the right thing? Why can't you just think? And now, as soon as I experienced the leadership and realized things are infinitely complex oftentimes, now, whenever I have that same feeling in my body of why can't they just do this? Why don't they figure it out? My brain already goes to, there might be something about this I haven't experienced yet. And the ability to have my mind opened is because the deepest pain places opened my heart to face my own judgments. And every time that I hit a spot like this, I have to let go of my own judgments, my own, oh, I hated leaders and now I am a leader. And now I've hurt people the same way that I didn't want them to hurt people when I was following them, and it begins to open your heart. And the thing that I try to do is to hold empathy for multiple things at once. So when I was a follower, I had so much empathy for followers. And then I became a leader. It was very easy to have empathy for leaders because you're like, it's really hard over here. What is important is to hold both, to be like, oh, it's hard to be a follower. It's hard to be a leader. It's hard to do both things instead of just having empathy for the current season of life you're in.
Yes.
I've had empathy for having no money. And then I've had empathy for how do you spend money if you have it well? I've had both experiences. And if you throw one out with the other, then you're losing the joy of learning how to hold the experiences of life together on earth. I want to just end with this, that I think empathy is what bridged all of the great divides in our marriage. I think most of the times when I felt like you finally understood and felt what it was like to be me, it healed the parts of my heart that had been broken and stuck. And I think that I've seen you as I've understood what it was like to be you, as I've been able to put myself in your shoes and imagine what it'd be like to be me around me and what my impact would be. I've seen your heart melt and feel safer. So it feels to me like the thing that probably unhooked us from a lot of pain cycles.
Yeah. It was these empathetic reflections inside of our marriage that repaired it, because the one thing that both of us deeply wanted was to be understood by the other person. And oftentimes we looped in cycles of pain, bitterness, and resentment towards each other because we didn't feel seen or understood. And so once we could engage in that empathetic space, free from any sense of shame about the role that we played, and just acknowledge, I bet in your shoes, it felt a lot like this. It just, like you said, it melted both of us down and said, oh, I can be close to you now. I'm not having to guard myself from not only your judgments, but from the actions that might come from your judgments. Because when we can empathize with another individual, the possibility of us acting in destructive behaviors is much less than if we don't have empathy. Because once I empathize, I engage the human condition, and in that engagement, compassion and love can overtake me inside of that place of empathy. And all of a sudden, it changes the way that I begin to approach people simply because of the humanization process.
Yeah.
So it's good. Empathy is not easy for people who don't have it initially. It takes time. It takes a willingness. It takes a humility to say, actually, I have to be okay with being wrong about things. I have to be okay with confronting the judgments I've held inside of my heart. I have to be okay with engaging in a repentant process of actually showing up to the world and saying, I haven't done this well, and I haven't done it right. We will not outrun our lack of empathy. Eventually, circumstances that we have judged will find themselves at our doorstep, because I believe that there is a invitation on earth to know something about love for every individual. And I just don't feel like we can outrun the things that we judge. Eventually they knock on our door, because again, there's this invitation coming to us saying, hey, do you want to know more about love? Hey, do you want to know more about love? All right, this situation can happen over and over again to you until you submit to the law of love. Like, it's this repeated invitations.
I think I just want to judge really, really rich, happy people and then be forced to experience that.
Richness and happiness.
I'm going to judge them, and then I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So just saying like, it is hard for those who don't have it because it means that you have to engage a process.
It's getting outside of your own self. It's learning about other people, and it's starting to have humility.
Right.
And can I say one thing?
Well, I wanted to wrap with this on my side of this portion. A word you used earlier was curiosity, and humility and curiosity go hand in hand with empathy. In order to empathize, I have to be willing to let go of what I think to be true and ask a lot of questions. And a lot of times we feel more safe casting our opinions on things rather than saying, actually, that's going to take a back burner. I'm just going to ask questions, and I may have to learn something. I may be corrected in this process.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to end on was one of your counselors, who's incredible.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot from.
Talking about Barry.
Yeah.
I love Barry.
He says this: if I had been in your shoes and experienced what you had experienced, I would totally be thinking the way that you're thinking. Or if I'd been in your shoes and had experienced the things you've experienced, I could totally do the same thing as you. And in the beginning, I was like kind of annoyed with that, because he's like, I could say that to anybody in any circumstance. I could say that. And the more I've thought about it and the more I've understood it, I'm like, yeah, it's so true. There's not a person out there that if we'd actually had the experiences they'd had had the teachings they'd had, the beliefs they'd had, the process they'd had, of course we could be just like them. And that ability to see that we could be the same as other people instead of being like we're different. And that's so valuable and important. And again, if we have boundaries, because we can say, oh, like, I don't want to be a murderer like this person murdered people. So I'm going to say, I don't like murder. But I can say, if I had the same situations as them and learned the same things they did, I could have ended up in their shoes.
Right.
The idea of I can have boundaries and decide I don't want to do a destructive behavior while I can also hold empathy for how anybody can get to where they got.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. If you've been listening to this and you feel impacted by it, share this with people. Mm-hmm. Also, subscribe on YouTube. That's a place to go hit subscribe, hit the bell button if you haven't already done it. That really helps us get the message out. As the more subscribers we build in that space, it expands the message.
We love having dialogues with people on Instagram. So if things connect, if you have any moments that hit you deep or open something up for you, we'd love to hear about it. And we're glad that you're here with us.
Yeah.
If the world was an empathetic place, it'd be kinder for everyone.
Yeah, it would be. All right. I'm
the end.
I'm going to go play today.
Okay. Let's do it together.
Play?
Yeah.
What kind of play?
Well, I meant like go ride bikes in the sun.
Oh, stupid play.
What kind of play were you thinking?
You know.
I'm open. Let's play all the ways.
What?
I said we can play all the ways.
Play all the ways.
Yeah. What do you think I said?
I don't know. It almost makes no sense. Start making sense, Abby. I can't empathize with you. All right. Hey, bye.
Bye.